Come with me as we recap a movie where Leonardo DiCaprio throws the N-word way too many times. In 1858, 2 years before the Civil War, a group of shackled men are forced to take on a long journey by foot to a place where they'll be sold into forced labor. They are accompanied by their overseers, the Speck brothers. By nighttime, the group encounters Dr. Schultz, who claims to be a traveling dentist. Ace Speck is suspicious of Schultz and tells him to quickly state his business or be met with the afterlife. Schultz says he's looking for the Speck brothers and wants to purchase one of the shackled men they plan on selling. Schultz seems to be tracking the whereabouts of the Brittle brothers from the Kerry plantation. As it turns out, one of the shackled men came from that plantation, and Schultz wants to buy and turn him into his guide. He asks Django if he knows who the Brittle brothers are, and Django confidently states each of the brothers' names: Big John, Ellis, and Roger, sometimes known as Little Raj. Django also says they were overseers at the Kerry plantation, where he came from before being sold off by his previous owner. Before they can continue talking, Ace enters Karen mode and rudely interrupts their conversation, warning Schultz to stop talking to Django. Schultz tries to calm him down again, saying that he's simply trying to examine the goods and conducting a transaction. However, Ace refuses to sell Django and points his weapon at Schultz after he doesn't listen to his order. Left with no choice, Schultz makes his move. In a blink of an eye, he brushes Ace's teeth with some hot lead. He also does the same thing to Dickie's horse, making him fall and get pinned to the ground by the animal's heavy body. Schultz then walks toward Dickie and sarcastically apologizes to the horse for putting him in such an uncomfortable situation. Despite what just happened, Schultz remains calm and tells Dickie to keep his emo screams of agony to a minimum because he still has to finish his conversation with Django. Django goes to grab Ace's clothes, but Schultz calls him the N-word, so Django pushes his weight on his ass. After confirming that Django can indeed help him find the Brittle brothers, Schultz returns to Dickie and pays him for Django. Schultz then gives the rest of the shackled men the keys to their shackles and tells them their options. As Schultz and Django leave, the rest of the shackled men, now free, go after Dickie and gives him a one-way ticket to the afterlife. The next day, Schultz and Django arrive in Daughtry, where they unintentionally gain the attention of the town folks because it's probably the first time they've seen a black man. They stop by an inn, but the innkeeper gets jump-scared when he sees Django in his bar. So Schultz sends him running scared to the sheriff. After helping themselves to some nice cold beer, Schultz reveals that he's a bounty hunter and explains what it is to Django. It's like a reward. Schultz makes a deal with Django to pay him a substantial amount of money and free him after they take down the Brittle brothers. Then the sheriff arrives, acting high and mighty as he tells Schultz and Django to come outside. Once in front of the town folks, the fugly-ass sheriff starts to make himself look good in front of them. While he's yapping, Schultz calmly approaches him with a smile and suddenly puts holes in his chest, giving the sheriff an impromptu retirement. Schultz then informs everyone that the sheriff is actually a wanted criminal and one of Schultz's bounties. The marshal lets them free. As they continue with their journey, Schultz learns that Django is married and got separated from his wife when they attempted to escape from their plantation. It seems Django plans to look for his wife once he's free and buy her freedom too. Django then reveals that his wife's name is Broomhilda, which surprises Schultz because it's a German name. Django says his wife was raised by a German and learned to speak the language a little. Turns out his wife is Olivia Pope. Why isn't she handling it? Touched by their story, Schultz swears that once they're done with the Brittle brothers' business, he will free Django and let him save his wife. Before going to the plantation owned by Mr. Bennett, where they believe the Brittle brothers are, Schultz and Django make a quick stop in town. Schultz wants Django to play a valet character and lets him choose the costume he wants to wear. Django chooses the flashiest one he can get his hands on, just to let everyone know they ain't messing with no broke.
But she ain't messing with no broke.
When they arrive at Mr. Bennett's plantation, everyone is surprised once again to see someone like Django riding a horse. He says it's against the law for N people to be riding on horses. I just know his maid wants to slap his face. Schultz tries to turn things around by saying he and Django took a long journey to purchase one of his girls. When Bennett asks what Schultz would do if he declined his request, Schultz simply implies he has enough money to change his mind. Being the businessman that he is, Bennett immediately lightens up and becomes tremendously welcoming to them. While Schultz distracts Bennett, Django tours the plantation and discreetly looks for the Brittle brothers. Django asks his guide about them, but she doesn't seem to know such names. However, Django quickly realizes that they might have changed their names and describes how they look instead. Sure enough, the guide recognizes them. It turns out they changed their name to the Schaffer brothers, and the guide points where they're all at to Django. As he sees them, Django immediately recalls all the terrible things the brothers did to him and Broomhilda. Without wasting any time, Django goes to the first two brothers who are about to punish one of the laborers for breaking some eggs. Django confronts John first and asks if he remembers him. Before John can even completely recall who he is, Django unclogs his cholesterol-clogged heart and sends him to meet his maker. Little Roge scurries to retaliate, but drops his weapon because his joints hurt and his motor skills are a little lacking. Feeling sorry for him, Django takes John's whip and gives Little Raj some rapid chiropractic adjustments, hoping to help him loosen up some of his joints. After that, he also gives him a one-way ticket to the afterlife. Schultz arrives and Django tells him he just took out two of the Brittle brothers. The two then turn their attention to Ellis Brittle, who is already trying to hightail his way out of the plantation. Schultz sets his sights on Ellis, but before taking the shot, he asks Django if he's positive it's Ellis. Django is confused by what positive means, but after Schultz tells him what it means, he immediately says he's sure it's Ellis. With Django's confirmation, Schultz takes out Ellis without breaking a sweat. Of course, after the gunshots, Bennett and his men arrive to figure out what happened. Schultz explains the situation, leaving them unable to interfere and letting the two men walk away unharmed from the plantation. However, later that night, Bennett gathers his gang to get back on Schultz and Django for making a fool out of his ass. One of the men complains about their mask that night because they can barely see through the holes. Even fatback Jonah Hill complains and rips the holes to make it larger. The man who was charged to make the mask that day immediately gets angry because his wife spent the entire day making those masks. So he decides to nope the fuck out of there because his KKK friends are ungrateful. Despite the shortcomings, Bennett marches on to get his revenge. When Bennett's gang circles Schultz's wagon, he blows it up from afar, sending the gang of vagabonds into Joe Rogan's podcast. The rest are chicken shit and flee. As for Bennett, Schultz gives Django the honor of handing him a ticket to Mar-a-Lago. After that, Schultz tells Django Broomhilda's folklore. Feeling responsible for him, Schultz reveals he can't let Django go on his own to save his wife. Schultz tells Django to continue working with him through winter. During that time, he will get a third of his bounties. Once that's done, he will accompany him to find out where his wife is. Django accepts Schultz's offer and begins his training arc. During one of their missions, Django is tasked to take out a man named Smithy Bacall. However, he hesitates because the man is with his son. Schultz notices he's troubled and explains that Smithy is a terrible man who is wanted for robbery and taking the lives of many innocent people. On top of that, Schultz points out that Smithy's corpse is worth $7,000. So Django shoots his ass with a quickness. After that, Django continues hunting bad guys with Schultz throughout winter. In his downtime, Django trains his gunslinging skills with his master, Olaf. As time passes, he gains enough experience and levels up to a level 91 bounty hunter. By winter's end, Schultz and Django set out to look for Broomhilda, whom they believe is at the Candyland plantation owned by Calvin Candie. Given that Calvin is a well-off man, brute forcing their way into saving Broomhilda is out of the question. Fortunately, Schultz comes up with a cunning plan. It turns out that Calvin is into black men fighting, what they call mandingo fighting, so Schultz proposes they try to purchase one of Calvin's fighters and Broomhilda in the process as well. To do that, Schultz will pretend to be the buyer, and Django will be his expert advisor on the matter. With their plan set, the two meet up with Calvin. After a very graphic and cruel match, Django meets the man who's only into women under 25 years old. Schultz offers Calvin $12,000 for one of his best fighters. The offer is good enough to make them capture Calvin's attention and make him give them an invite to Candyland. While on their way to Candyland, Schultz gets confirmation that Broomhilda is indeed there. Further into the journey, the group encounters Candie's men, who have cornered a Mandingo fighter that escaped from Candyland. The fighter pleads to Calvin, saying he can no longer fight. Sadly, Calvin learns that the man has continuously lost his recent fights and isn't in a generous mood towards him. All the white men start laughing, and they have the ugliest laugh I done ever heard. Frustrated with seeing someone showing such suffering, Schultz tries to step in and save the man. He offers to reimburse Candie in exchange for the fighter's life. However, Django intervenes to prevent Schultz from exposing their cover. Calvin then asks Django if he doesn't mind him ordering his tracker dogs to maul the fighter. Although he's upset, Schultz has no choice but to watch the dogs make a meal out of the fighter. I've never hated Leonardo DiCaprio more in a role in my life. When they finally arrive at Candyland, Stephen, Calvin's resident Jedi Master, is shocked to see someone like Django riding a horse. Frustrated, Stephen calls Django the N-word multiple times. Calvin clarifies that Django's a freeman. Calvin then orders him to treat him like one of his guests. The fact that Samuel L. Jackson plays the real Uncle Ruckus, who is racist towards his own, has me dead. Calvin then greets his sister Lara, like most inbred white people do, with kisses. Schultz then asks Calvin about Broomhilda, under the pretense that he wants to meet someone who knows how to speak German, since he hasn't spoken it for years. Calvin asks where Broomhilda is, and learns she has been thrown into the hotbox. He then orders his men to get her out and have her ready for Schultz. As they pull a battered Broomhilda out of the hotbox, Django desperately pulls a Ray Charles pretending he can't see to not jeopardize their mission. Later that night, Lara delivers Broomhilda to Schultz's room so they can speak German. Broomhilda looking hesitant because she has no appetite for German sausage. When they finally meet, Schultz tells Broomhilda they will only speak in German because there's a chance someone else is listening. Schultz then reveals that he is there to save her. He then lets her finally reunite with Django, and the shock of seeing him causes her to pass out because they haven't seen each other since filming the Ray Charles movie. Later at dinner, Schultz begins to make his move on Calvin to secure Broomhilda's freedom, and things seem to be going well. Unfortunately for them, Lara comments on Broomhilda looking like she wants Django's eggplant. This alerts Steven because he knows a snake on the plane whenever he sees one, and manages to figure out that Broomhilda knows Django. Broomhilda denies all of this, so Steven comes up with a plan to undress her in front of everyone. This riles up Django, and Steven knows for sure now. Steven immediately lets Calvin know that Schultz and Django's real target is Broomhilda, and not one of his fighters. So when he returns to the dinner table later, Calvin confronts Schultz and Django about trying to make a fool out of him. Calvin then alters the deal and puts a $12,000 price on Broomhilda's freedom. At first, Schultz is reluctant, but he quickly accepts the deal when Calvin threatens to hit Broomhilda's skull with a hammer. As they finish up the paperwork for Broomhilda's freedom, Calvin notices that Schultz is being a sore loser and can't help but further rub salt in his wounds even more. He forces Schultz to shake his hand as a sign of defeat. Otherwise, he won't honor their deal to buy Broomhilda's freedom. In a surprising turn of events, the usually calm and composed Schultz snaps due to Calvin's arrogance. He gives Calvin some shots of Ozempic as he is about to shake his hand. Of course, Calvin's men react immediately in shooting Schultz, thus yeeting him. Of course, Mr. White Dick Lover over here, mourning the loss of Calvin. Chaos ensues as Django fights back, but it unfortunately ends in him surrendering when he realizes that Steven has taken hold of Broomhilda. The next day, Django is hanged upside down by Billy, one of Calvin's overseers, and someone who has beef with him. Billy is planning to castrate Django, but Steven stops him. It seems Lara has changed her mind about snipping Django's zucchini and plans to just send him off to a faraway mining company. Instead of a quick death, she wants him to live out the rest of his life being forced to play Minecraft until the day comes when his back gives out. While en route to the mining company, Django comes up with an escape plan. He tells his guards that he is a bounty hunter and that his targets are in Candyland. After sweet-talking them into believing he'll share the bounty with them, Django is finally freed. He then doesn't hesitate to take out all of the gullible guards, including the director of the movie for making them all say the N-word almost 110 times in total. After that, he makes his way back to Candyland. Django quickly takes out the majority of Calvin's men. He eventually returns to the barn where Billy hanged him upside down earlier. He takes Broomhilda's papers from Schultz's body and offers his final farewell to him. He then goes on to rescue Broomhilda. Later that night, Lara and Steven return home after Calvin's funeral. To their surprise, they find Django waiting for them. Django quickly takes out their guards, including Billy. Django then tells Lara's maids to say goodbye to her, and they all say, "Bye, Felicia," as she dies. As for Steven, he tries to use his Jedi powers to sneakily run away. Django sees him, though, and stops him by exploiting an ancient weakness of any warrior, an arrow to the knee. However, in Steven's case, it's busting a kneecap. Filled with pain and unable to walk, Steven can do nothing but curse Django for what he's done. Of course, Django doesn't pay him any attention. Django ignites the dynamite he planted around the mansion and makes his way to Broomhilda. The two then watch as the mansion explodes with Steven in it. After that, the two of them victoriously ride off together on their horses. For those who have seen this movie, how did you guys feel when you watched? Rage? Or do you refuse to see it just like Spike Lee? Would love to read your thoughts and discussions. Until next time.
Subscribe to watch more videos like this. Turn on notifications. And leave a like, it really helps the channel out. Thank you for watching.